And it's finally time for the long-awaited UFC debut of El Valiente, the Brave, Mexico's own Fernando Padilla, the former Fury FC champ. He got a win on Fury FC 46, looking for a fight. He was signed to the UFC, and that was back in 2021. Padilla now taking on one of those fringe-to-be-ranked type of fighters. 12-fight UFC vet in his third stint. It's Julian Erosa. And Matt, the reason I say that is because, and I'll throw the tweet up there, Julian Erosa, in his last fight, was a minus 165 favorite against Alekseeva, who at the start of fight week was ranked 15th. But then 2 weeks prior, Jonathan Pierce had gotten a win, so they then put Pierce as number 15. They dropped Caceres from the rankings, and Matt, I mean, you talk about disguising your hands to throw the head kick. Alex Caceres with a knockout of the year contender against Julian Erosa. So now Erosa, like a guy on Sunday morning, picking up the pieces, walking home. He's got to get a win in this matchup, and Erosa's going from fighting a fringe top 15 fighter, the fringiest of fringe.
But okay, this is...
to a debuting UFC fighter.
I understand what you're saying about Erosa, but I kind of disagree with it, and this is why. If you're, like, I don't look at him as, like, the 16th or 17th ranked guy in the division. How I look at Julian Erosa is, anybody in the division he can offer a difficult fight to. He can also lose to anybody coming off Contender Series, too. If you're ranked 16th in the division, you're probably not going to fall to that level, I don't think. Like, I don't think Caceres would lose to somebody coming off Contender Series. Just for Erosa, he has great cardio, he has good durability if he's able to get past that kind of initial hump, but like we've seen, it is wild to say that he has good durability because he has been finished on numerous occasions at this point. But it is, if you catch him cold, you can knock him out. But if he settles into the fight, it's going to be a really difficult fight for you. He's going to make it ugly. He can eat shots. He's got good volume. He has a really good skill set. Just Erosa is one of those weird fighters because for as good as he is offensively, those holes are still there defensively. And even when he is able to settle into a fight, he still does get hit. It's just he doesn't go down as often.
Julian Erosa is a really shifty fighter because he could be built as a southpaw, and if you do consider it for both of these guys, the switching of the stances can happen. Now, Padilla primarily, like I'd say 90% of it from orthodox, but he's not opposed to switching it up. But when you look at a guy like Julian Erosa, similar to Trey Waters that's on this card and Bobby Green that was on last week's card, striking defense. A lot of head movement, hands very low, but those odd angle punches really set things up because it's hard to see what's coming. But let's throw it on over. I mean, you look at a guy like Fernando Padilla. He hasn't fought in a meaningful amount of time. He did an interview, and that's coming up with a guy that you guys know and love from MMA Sucka, Jamey-Lyn. And in that one, the question was, well, why is there such a layoff? And the quotable was, just the visa. Really, to be real with you, just the visa issues. And other than that, he's been training for the last couple of years. And Padilla comes out of a great gym. We're talking about Timo Oyama with some of the best in the world, former champ Carlos Esparza, Colin Oyama. We've seen him corner a lot of fighters in the UFC. But for Padilla, you look at all of the fights. He starts off his pro career back at 18 years old in Mexico in a co-main event slot of all things. And that was a card that was headlined, and one half of it was Jorge Gonzalez, you know, the guy that was supposed to be in the UFC, but he had a dirty USADA sussy, and Gonzalez just couldn't make the walk a few years ago. So when you look at it for a guy like Padilla, at such a young age, he was able to accrue a nice record. He fought a good level competition. He had a loss back to Dan Ige that was 2 fights before Ige was in the UFC. He had a win over Derek Minner where Minner was beating him, and he took him down, and then all of a sudden, Padilla just pulls out a submission win, and Minner's just like laid out on the canvas. It was just a crazy win over with the LFA. Padilla continues. He gets rolling. His last loss was to Spike Carlisle 4 years ago. He beats Nate Richardson by split decision. I went back and watched that. I thought that Padilla won that one, and then his last time out against Cameron Graves, it was like, listen, Padilla might struggle in this area, in that area. Padilla was walking him down, beating him sound.
It's just like, Padilla could be a great fighter one day. Why are they making this his debut? Like, that's the weird thing about this. They're doing him no favors whatsoever by just throwing him into the deep waters against a guy like Erosa. Yes, he could win this fight by early knockout, but the problem is, if you beat Julian Erosa by early knockout, do you get an easy fight after? Not at all. They just get way more difficult. And if you lose to Julian Erosa, okay, it's not the end of the world, but...
Cut the difference. Why do you think Julian Erosa is going to win this fight?
I just think the overall volume, like again, a guy coming off a long layoff who's young in his career fighting Julian Erosa. Erosa has those skills to where if he closes the distance, makes it really uncomfortable and throws that elite level volume, I don't think the takedown is going to be a big factor for Erosa. Again, he's not a real great grappler. He has great submission abilities, but he's not some D1 wrestler by any means. There's a lot of like loose single legs kind of from the clinch. I just think the wrestling and the overall kind of the striking and the overall kind of ugliness of Erosa's game. It's just a difficult game plan for any prospect with a long layoff to come into the UFC against.
I think the southpaw to southpaw look in the matchup, the fact that Padilla is such a good counter striker, I think Padilla beats Julian Erosa in this fight.
No, I'm not disagreeing with that. And Padilla could go on and have some great career. My only point is, this is a weird fight for him. Because if you beat Julian Erosa, which he very well could, you're just going to go on and fight monsters after that. And if you lose to Julian Erosa, then it's going to get rid of a lot of the shine. That's my only point.
And the really interesting thing about this fight, and Padilla's done a couple of different interviews leading up to this fight with some different people. He's touched on the fact that these two guys have drilled together, but they didn't train together. It was a few years ago, so they got some chances on the mat, but it really was a nothing burger. And when you look at a fight like this, Padilla struggled with the takedown defense in his prior fights. And if you look at it for Julian Erosa, he's kind of struggled with the overall concussive blows in a lot of these fights. He's been knocked down 8 times in 12 UFC fights, but in some of the car crashes, we saw that fight of the night, fight of the year contender against Steven Peterson. He was able to rack up volume numbers, land really good power strikes, and he didn't get finished. And like you said to start this video off, as these fights go on, it's almost like his brainstem gets stronger and he builds himself up in a lot of these ones. So we could see a very, very good fight between these two guys. The unknowns of Padilla with the long layoff, but the fact that he does come out with a really good game plan, really good kicks. He kicks to all 3 levels and he throws some really good counter strikes. But if Erosa is able to go out there, tick up some of the volume numbers, pick his power shots like we know that he can from those odd angles, Erosa is a good contender to get a win in a fight like this. He is almost a 2-1 favorite in the matchup. Topology votes surprised us there to you. I'm going to say over under 80% Erosa.
No, I think they'll be under 80%.
I think they're going to be under. They're 90%, so 544 total votes, 90% going Erosa, 56% by decision, 29% by submission for the 10% that have Padilla, 54% by knockout. I have Padilla to get a win in this matchup. I think Padilla is going to win by decision in the fight, but we differ on that pick, and that's fine.
Yeah, I just find it odd that you're so confident in Padilla. I do have Erosa, though. Again, I just think the volume's going to be really difficult for Padilla to deal with, especially coming off a long layoff. I just think Julian Erosa is one of those guys where if you're coming off a layoff and you're trying to find your rhythm back in a fight, you don't want to fight Julian Erosa.
2 of the biggest guys you're ever going to find at featherweight at 6'1", and surprisingly, Julian Erosa doesn't have the reach advantage in the fight. We'll see how this one plays out. Split on the pick. Let us know down below in the comments section who you have. The lower weight classes, all the hotness. Bantamweight in the main event. You're going to want to keep it locked in with Fight Night picks. We always say, let's get into it.